Welcome to the ProBrick exclusive YouTube channel. You're with Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison. I don't practice as a minister anymore. The call went off my life, and I recognise that. It wasn't an issue. One of the things that we used to have to do when we were dealing with cult members, trying to rehabilitate people that have been in cults or got their religion mixed up, was help them to come completely out. Now, what I mean by this is, and I'm going to bring this around to relationships as well. I just thought of it today. They'd be called what I would describe, and this happens to a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, PEMO, physically attending the meetings and that, but mentally out. They don't want to be a part of it because of the way in which that religion works, in particular the J-Dubs, along with others as well. As a matter of fact, a lot of mainstream Christianity, if you're not in the group, they'll ostracize you eventually, one way or another. It's just that J-Dubs are brutal with it. They'll just cut you off. They shun you. So what they do is they physically attend the meetings, they're physically in, but mentally out. And this happens to a lot of people in relationships as well. They're physically turning up, but they're mentally out of the relationship. They're turning up for the benefits because they know that it's going to work for them, that you're physically going to supply them, but mentally they're out. And this is how a lot of affairs work, and how things go wrong for blokes and women. The person's physically turning up and playing the part, but they're mentally out. Physically present, but mentally out. It's called PEMO. It's called, how you going, mate? Principle of PEMO. And this is how a lot of affairs happen. The people, and see, this is the thing. Let me come back to the religion. And you've got to have your wits about you. You've got to understand human psyche, fear, why people don't resolve things, because it's all about unresolved. You cannot find resolve in the Jehovah's Witness religion. You cannot find a resolve. If you pull away from that religion, you will not find resolve. They'll shun you. They will cut you off. They'll cut your family off. The people that are still in, they'll cut you off. If you separate yourself from that religion, you're immediately cut off. That's why people stay physically in, but mentally out. They don't tell anyone that they don't believe anymore. They don't tell anyone that they're not interested anymore. They just keep going to the meetings, but psychologically they're out, because they know if they let somebody know that they don't believe in their beliefs anymore, there's not going to be a resolve. They're going to go through a process that will disfellowship them, or at least they'll have to sit up the back of the meeting and they'll be categorized, with the ultimate punishment being shunned, and that's by family members as well. Do you get the principle? They're physically turning up to the meetings. They don't really want to be there because psychologically they don't believe. They're out. They're out. Now this happens in relationships, right? You got to get this. This is a revelation. This is powerful information. They're physically turning up, right? They're physically in the relationship, sort of like the devil, you know, but mentally, psychologically, they're out. They're not got the attraction and the desire that they had initially to really want to be there. They're playing the part of the devil, you know. Now, there's ways in which you can work this out. If you have been around women long enough, I've been with them all my life, intimately, all my life. You can see the signs. There's a lot of people, men and women, who are physically in the relationship but mentally out. And what happens is when they get to that point where they're starting to withdraw mentally, you can see the signs. Now, it goes deeper than this because they're physically showing up. I've had a few women do this. They're physically turning up and they're getting all the goodies and whatnot, but mentally they're out, they're moving, they're withdrawing. And this is how people shift into affairs, because they're physically with you, they don't know how to tell you that they don't have the feelings anymore, or they don't feel right anymore about it, or they're not in it anymore. And so then they don't know how to tell you that they're fading away. Reason being probably because you're playing the right role, but the issues underneath the relationship, the underlying issues, the things that need to be resolved that they can't seem to find resolve for, are causing them to withdraw, to find a way out. And usually people who can't resolve, whatever the reason is, there's lots of reasons for unresolved, they will sabotage the relationship, because the pressure of unresolved combined with conscience and possibly the drama of the situation that's causing resolve, they'll opt for a sabotage. They will sabotage the thing. Now, the sabotaging process can happen in several ways. It's going to be gradual. It's going to happen in microscopic steps. And if you're not sharp, if you're not aware, if you cannot see through their behaviour what's going on, you might miss the whole thing. And the next thing, you're catching someone in an affair. That's how it works. Incremental withdrawal processes, moving into a transition out of the relationship and into another one, while still physically present with you. That's how it works. It's called PIMO, physically in but mentally out. Now, in relationships, the consequences might not be so bad if it's just a long-term relationship or this kind of thing. Different if it's a marriage. That could be more traumatic. Long-term relationships have their element of trauma as well. But if you can understand the principle just in itself of PIMO, a person that's physically present but mentally gone, and this happens a lot, then you're a step ahead. Now, some of the signs are, and the primary sign is, more value for the problem than for resolve. More value for the problem affecting the relationship than resolving the problem affecting the relationship. And what does that mean? If the problem is in terms causing conflict, or conflict in the relationship, or some kind of disruption or division, and that's been recognized and it's been identified, if that problem's not being resolved, and there's legitimate ways of doing that and fair ways, if it be a third party, say for instance, which it is 9 times out of 10, an outside Hi Joe! Hi! An outside interference or something of that kind, and they're not going to resolve that issue, that's showing you, right, that there's a lack of value towards a relationship. Now, you can show tolerance to that at your own peril and at the loss of your time. You can show tolerance to that for the person to give that person time to work out what their values are. But if there's no resolve forming, if there's no formation towards resolve, if it's just what could you say, if it's just in limbo, right? Peace via limbo, that's actually not peace, it's chaos. Anything to do with limbo equals chaos ultimately, because nobody knows where they stand. But the resolve is still in force. The unresolved, I should say, the unresolved is still in force to the exclusion of possibilities for resolve. You got problems because that person's still physically in, but psychologically, to some extent, to some percentage, they're psychologically out. And that's where you've got to understand how value works, how contribution to the relationship works, where contribution to the relationship counts, where value. See, it all comes down at the end of the day to value. If that person's not resolving the issue and they know there's a solution or a possibility for resolve, then they've got a certain amount of value, right, and a certain amount of investment in the unresolved. And it's an investment against the investment in the relationship. See, people don't realise how dangerous and how blatant unresolved is if there's a possibility for resolve. It's like this, right? You're at the beach having a swim. You get caught in a rip. The lifeguard doesn't see that you're caught in the rip. Your partner knows you're caught in the rip and they've got to wave to the lifeguard. But they're looking at you and they're looking at the lifeguard and doing nothing. Right? You've got you floating out to sea on the one side. You've got the lifeguard on the other side. And the person in the middle. They're not singing out to the lifeguard. They're not singing out. They're not jumping in to rescue you. What's that make that person? Really, what's that make that person? Negligent. Absolutely 100% negligent. Me and my mate, Matty Oates, Brickslayer on Facebook, we were surfing the bend at Avoca, about 2 to 4 foot, rights and lefts, in between a big rip. Beautiful afternoon, great surf. And all of a sudden there's 2 girls floating out to sea. I think they were 15 and 16 or something. So I said to Matt, we better rescue these Sheilas. And we did. We put them on the boards and we paddled them in, which was an experience in itself, you can imagine it. Paddling behind a girl on the front of your board in a bikini. And we got them in. Now, what would it have meant if we watched those girls out the back, they're out in the ocean, there's no lifeguards, if we just watched them flail at the back of the breakers, pulled out by a rip? And we just, what happens if we just sit on our boards and go, oh well, they're out and, you know, they're in danger, and we just catch the next wave like nothing's happening and somebody drowns. That's what unresolved is. Now, we knew there was a way of fixing it, and that was to get up off our asses and paddle over there without getting drowned ourselves, because they're obviously starting to panic. And we had to get over there and save them. They were grateful. We got them in. It wasn't easy. 2 to 4 foot breakers, trying to get them through the breakers. But there was an answer for resolve. And it wasn't an easy one, and it wasn't a comfortable one. And it took effort, but we did it. We resolved the issue and we saved those girls from possible drowning. Well, it was likely they were going to drown. They probably would have drowned each other, trying to save one another. So we made the effort to find a resolve. Now, if you're in a relationship, let's come back to PIMO. We were physically in and mentally in. We made the rescue. Now, PIMO relationship, just say it's you you're the one that's not finding resolve, right? This person needs you to fix a problem, be it with your children or whatever. I'm fucking sure if my children involve themselves in my relationship, they don't last 5 minutes. And they wouldn't dare now. They learned a long time ago, don't get involved in my business. It's not their place. But because you've got to be physically in and mentally in. It's no good just turning up, trying to wing it. You've got to play a physical role and a mental role. So if there's an issue that needs to be resolved, as I keep saying, and the person's physically in, but mentally out on that resolve, that's going to lead to trouble. It's going to lead to harm. Somebody somewhere along the line is going to get harmed. Now, if the problem's an outside influence, it could be an emotional incestual situation with an outside third party that shouldn't even be in the relationship. That's actually an emotional affair, which the person's now turning to somebody else for relief of the issue without facing it. In other words, this person's not accountable or responsible to this other person as being in a relationship. So they shift to somebody else who they can whinge about the problem to, but not fix it, and find some kind of justification for not fixing it, and then become intimate with that person because they didn't need to find resolve. That person justified the situation without resolve. And this is how you can tell if somebody's physically in and mentally out. They're showing up physically, but mentally they're not making the same contribution. They're avoiding the issue, right? And that's going to become an issue, a serious issue. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody is going to get hurt because it's disrespectful. And as I said, you can show tolerance towards that, but you do it at your own peril and at the use of your own time. Now, these are the signs that somebody's physically in the relationship, gaining the physical benefits, but not psychologically in. Sign number one, and I have to go to this sign, is communication lack thereof. Withdrawal of communication. And what that can be a sign of is, well, it's definitely a sign of loss of interest. And don't kid yourself, that's what it is. It's not busyness. It's not, oh, my job and oh, my work, because 9 times out of 10, they're just sitting on their ass doing something else. Or it can also be a sign of that person is, again, emotionally connecting with somebody outside the relationship and communicating with them. Because what unresolved does is it puts pressure on somebody and exposes them to their psychological weaknesses that they're not prepared to face. Because all things start with facing ourselves. If we can't face ourselves and our issues, how are we going to face issues that are outside ourselves? Particularly if it's with a loved one or a sibling or this kind of thing. And this is point number 2. How do they deal with the issues with siblings and parents? Listen and watch. And if they've got a way of dealing with things, watch what it is. Is it critical? criticism? Is there a resolve, or is it all the other person's fault? Because that's what's going to happen to you. If that person's not taking responsibility and accountability for their part in the problem, they're not going to take responsibility and accountability for you and your problem with them. They're physically in, but mentally out. They're making the physical investment, but not the mental one. And you've got to have both. PIMO. So, the second one is, number one, withdrawal of communication or lack thereof. Number two, and I say this all the time, but phone down. Phone down. Or on phone reclusively. They recluse, right, with the phone. Because what you got to realise is the phone is a person. It's 1,000 persons. It's as many persons as you want it to be. And it's the great destroyer now of relationships. Because women can justify themselves without resolving anything or taking accountability or anything, because there's thousands of people that will validate them via the phone. And that's what people want, validation. They want validation, they want acceptance without accountability. See, you can sink your life into somebody, house them, have the 2-story home, the in-ground pool, the $20,000 kitchen or whatever it might be, the kids and all the pressure and shit that comes with that. You're working your ass off. Everything's provided. It's all there. But if there's unresolved, I guarantee you at some point, somebody's going to get hurt. Now, if that unresolved's your fault, well, you've brought it on yourself. Okay? Because sometimes we're blindsided, just blind and ignorant to what we need to resolve, even if the person's telling you. Because I've done this. I've done this in my first marriage. I was so cocksure of myself, I didn't think I needed resolve. Well, I needed resolve after she met somebody else at the gym, didn't I? I needed resolve fast. But it was too late. This is how you learn. Why learn the hard way? Sometimes you have to learn the hard way to work out what resolve is. Because without resolve, that's the beginning of the end. Unresolved is the beginning of the end. It will end. And usually it won't end well. Because people will take the pressure of the unresolved, be it their fault or somebody else's, and find a place where they don't need resolve, even if it's low-hanging fruit, even if it's a person that's a druggie or whatever. If they can confide in that person and get a sense of peace, they will, and they'll probably sleep with that person as a reward for taking away the pressure. Relationships are going to have pressure, right? If you're fair income and you want to have a relationship, it's going to have pressure. It's just a matter of whether the pressure is legitimate, whether it can have a way of resolve. And people that don't want to resolve, whether they're aware of it or not, the answers or not, are dangerous. They're very, very dangerous, because somebody's going to get hurt. Something's going to go down. And if they're putting the unresolved, the value of unresolved, before the value of the relationship, even though they're physically present, they're mentally out. They're mentally unstable. They're not solid. They're not in. They've got one foot on both sides of the fence. And somebody's going to get hurt. Who's that person going to be? Well, it depends how well you are. Number one, they withdraw communication. Number two, phone down. Recluse with the phone. Something's going on in the phone. Number three, start dressing up and dolling up themselves up for no reason, but it's not for you. They're asking you how they look. You might be making love to them and they're checking on how they feel. They're weighing themselves up for the next person. They're using your feedback to assure them that the next person will accept them. They're physically in but mentally out. Are you following me? Number 4, having to work back unusually. More often than not, I can guarantee you, and they're dressed up not in their usual work attire. I can guarantee you they're physically in and mentally out, and they're probably physically in with somebody else. Women will work 2 people at once to get what they want. They'll just do it. It's just how it is. And then number 5, and I'll leave it at this one. Sorry about the traffic noise, but number 5 is argumentiveness. Unnecessary arguments. Just arguments, and you're asking yourself, it's really not necessary. Why is this? I can tell you why it's happening. Now the person's shifting from physically in and mentally out, to transitioning physically in to physically out. Because where the mind is, the body will follow. And that's PIMO. There's a lot of people that are physically in, transitioning to mentally out, to being mentally out and physically in, to be followed by mentally out, transitioning to physically in, physically out, to mentally and physically out, and that's the end of the relationship, all because of unresolved. And if that unresolved is outside interference, there's not much you can do about it. Because the pressure coming from the outside interference, leading to outside interference for soothing, you're just stuck in the middle. So it comes down to either you think to yourself there is no problem at all when there is, and you become what's known as a simp. You don't want to deal with the issue when you should, and if that comes to the loss of the person via the signs that something's just not right, this person's not fit mentally in anymore, you're going to get what you deserve. But if you're on your game and in your frame, and you understand the principles of mentally in and physically in, and then the principles of transitioning from mentally in to mentally out, onto, if you can't turn it around, mentally out transitioning from physically in to physically out, you're going to get hurt. And it is all based on unresolved. If that person values unresolved over the relationship, walk away. Walk away. Because unresolved is always the beginning of the end. Have the brains and the discernment to know if that person is not a person of resolve, you've got every right to walk away. Resolve is the beginning, unresolved is the beginning of the end. And resolve is the maintenance and sustenance that a relationship needs to survive. That's the principle of PIMO in a relationship, physically in and mentally out. I hope that helps. I mean, honestly, a lot of you guys and girls are juggling stuff that you just don't know how to understand or manage. And that's what this channel's for. And that's why I'm doing this. Even though I don't practice as a minister anymore, for decades I worked up at the boys' home and with people There's the boys' home up the interest for you people. You'll see the lights up on that mountain. That's the boys' home at Carryong on the Central Coast. I had the privilege of going there under Pastor Ian Mackay and Pastor Jan Mackay for nearly 15 years. And we put on a Steve Grace concert there too, for the Christians that might be listening to this, with Reverend Ramsey Nuttall, Chaplain Ramsey Nuttall. So, Pimo, physically and mentally out as a result of unresolved. Really, I really do hope this has helped somebody, because if you can recognise these things and you've given tolerance to the unresolved and it doesn't look like it's going to take place, it's just not healthy, it's not good, it's not fair, it's not respectful. Walk away. Not because you hate you might still love that person, but I'm telling you, up ahead's trouble. Up ahead is trouble, because they've got more value for the unresolved than they have for the relationship. If they valued the relationship, they would be finding resolve, right? Especially if it's a problem that can be fixed without too much carnage, right? What you got to understand is unresolved is carnage in action, and it needs to be stopped to save the relationship. If that person's not willing to stop the carnage, then they're not willing, when it comes down to it, to fight for the relationship. And you'll find if you walk away from that person, you won't hear anything. They won't fight. They won't put up a fight. They'll carry unresolved for years and walk away from that relationship in minutes. You've got to be aware of what's going on within your relationship. It's your responsibility. And this will help you from being severely damaged by people that, quite frankly, shouldn't even be in a fucking relationship. They're not fit for it. This is Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, reaching out to help people on the ProBrick exclusive YouTube channel. Bye for now.